So I guess we could kind of just start with like what you just did. So you did deliveries today, right?
Yeah, so the functions of the farm are production and education.
Production and education.
Those are our big two. And then another important piece is community and sustainability.
Okay.
So the students, when they originally wrote the mission of the UW Farm, which is still the current mission on the website, are those elements. It's a place of discussion and learning. It's a place of food, and it's a place where people can get together, and one of sustainable practices. So.
And so how did you kind of fit into the farm? Like what was your background, a little bit of your background, and how you discovered the farm?
Yeah. In 2012, students realized they needed to hire a staffer for the farm. That the work it had gotten so popular that they needed to establish a farm manager position. And I was aware of that, although I was working for Viva Farms and Evergreen State College before that. But if you go back a little further, I was a commercial farmer, and I was an environmental studies undergraduate when I was in college, and then got a Master of Science in Natural Resource Management and Public Administration, and then found my way into farming haphazardly. It wasn't like I had an epiphany. I didn't know anyone in farming, not a soul.
So what happened?
I really wanted to be outside, and so I started to think about jobs that I could have outside. I thought about Soil Conservation Association, national parks system, forestry, and was trying to think about, might those be my future career? But I was in the state of Vermont, which is very much a farming state.
Okay.
And I got used to being for 10 years in a agricultural landscape and really enjoyed that. The feeling of the open space and the green space. Vermont is the Green Mountain State. So being outdoors and hiking and being around farming really spoke to me. So I started to think maybe I could get an internship on a farm.
And then, so how did you get to Seattle and specifically UW?
I would say the biggest factor was climate change.
Okay.
I started my own farm from raw land in what year was that? Oof. Wow. I would have to think about what year. 1995.
Okay.
1995, I bought raw land. It was cheap. There was no water, no house, no road, no electricity, nothing. It was just raw land.
Here in Washington?
In Maine.
In Maine, okay.
And I was farming that for 17 years from scratch, working on other farms. But in 2004, things started to shift dramatically, and that was Hurricane Katrina. And that hit the Gulf of Mexico. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened in New Orleans, but it was the first time, it was the establishment of FEMA, which is a federal emergency and medical section of the government, and people were stranded due to flooding in a hurricane. The ripple effect of that was the reality among farmers, at least everybody from Florida to Maine, that we're starting to have these dramatic changes in weather. And flooding and high winds and unpredictable weather became the new norm. So when imagine every day you go to work, and when you arrive, all the desks are in a different location every single day. You don't know where, you have to kind of adapt and go, okay, and realign what you're doing. And what ended up happening was the weather was getting worse and worse. There was more and more flooding. It was coming at different times of the year. And every time you're trying to adjust and adjust and adjust. And if weather is one of the single most important factors in what you do and how you make money and survive, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So I reached a tipping point when in my farm, due to personal tragedies that happened in my family and external, collided with this climate change. And in 2008, 2009, I'm thinking 2011, the storm came in at 91 mile an hour. And it was not on the weather. It was not announced in the weather.
Just random.
It was a microblast. And so I was out. It was during lambing season. And lambing season, you're up continuously anyway. And the wind started to pick up, and part of the barn roof started to come off. It was about 1 a.m., and I ran into the house and got my husband and said, I need help. There's something going on outside. And when I went outside, more of the roof was coming off. We tried to lash it down. I was up on a ladder and I fell off the ladder. The whole roof came off. And luckily that didn't hurt anything, but there are 75 head of, or ewes all giving birth in different states of giving birth. Some not very pregnant or anyway. So we had to move the whole flock into whatever buildings we had, but we couldn't see because there was no electricity. And so we had headlamps on. And we're trying to move in the driving rain and managed to get everything built, straw bale structures around the ewes that we couldn't move. And the next day I was like, okay, I don't know if I can keep doing this. A couple people rallied, but the long and short of it is the climate change and the weather, there are episodes occurring now that are much more violent than what I used to know. And so you can either build systems to adapt and change your types of crops or what you do and when you lamb or when you don't. And I also had 200 head of chickens also. Or it's an opportunity to switch gears and change things up. And so I started to think about where was I going to be in 10 years and think longer term. And I said, okay, I'm in a farming community. Everybody loves farms. Who's the most disconnected? Urban populations. Those are the people who should be exposed to farming. So I thought about, okay, if I'm not a farmer, and I had already had 3 knee surgeries at that point, and wrist surgery, I said, I need to think long term. So my switch was either get into education or veterinarian, because I had a lot of livestock. And I asked a lot of my friends, and they're like, you should just get into education. And so I moved to Seattle because I like this climate. I like the latitude. I love the mountains. I love the ocean. I mean, it's a pretty beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where you're from, but
I'm from Washington.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking gorgeous. So I came out here, and it was like I arrived. I looked around and I saw these crazy trees, the Douglas fir, and I was like, what are those trees?
And this was your first time
Yeah,
here?
and it was in 2010. I decided to come out. I started to play Ultimate Frisbee again in 2009 in order to find stress relief and to connect with people and do something fun. Rather than just being a farmer all the time. I would drag my kids along and they started to learn how to play Frisbee. And so I came out here for an alumni tournament.
A UW alumni tournament?
No, University of Vermont.
Oh.
So I was in Vermont for that long period of time. And I picked up Ultimate Frisbee my senior year.
Okay.
And played like a crazy person. And had a great time and really found what you could say was my posse, my tribe, my people, and really loved it. And I had played soccer for many years, but with knee surgeries, I had to stop. So I came out here for an alumni reunion Frisbee tournament, and I landed in Seattle in July and was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. There wasn't any rain. It was absolutely stunning. Went to this Frisbee tournament. There are 125 teams co-ed, and everyone's dressed in costumes.
Seems like a big event.
It's the largest co-ed Frisbee tournament in west of the Mississippi, I think.
What's it called?
It's now called Sunbreak. It used to be called Potlatch. So I had a great time and started to really think about this part of the world. And so I sold the farm when I went back. A very, very difficult decision. And kind of wrapped things up in a more graceful manner. Nothing went up for auction. Young farmers who were coming in, I sold them stuff at budget, at very cheap. all my equipment, taking apart the dairy and moving it to a young person who was starting a dairy. The sheep were sold to people who wanted to get into, raising a flock. And then found a buyer for the property and packed up everything that I owned and put it in a trailer with 2 kids and a dog, and then drove out here. And one of the great safety nets was going back to school. So if you want to move somewhere or restart, going to university or going and getting another degree, you automatically have people you're meeting, and you have hopefully mentors that you can find. So great thing about a university is the intellectual, the learning environment.
Yeah.
And so I chose to go back to school also because my last degree was in 1992.
Okay.
So I came here with the specific goal of having impact, but more with the next generation. And my kids were in their teens, and I started to think about how few people are exposed to farming. So it's less than 1% of the population.
Wow.
But 200 years ago, 60% of the population was
Wow.
farming. So in a very short span of a generation or two, most of us don't know where our food comes from. And cities are increasing in their size. So it is very soon, the time is here where nearly 80% of the population of the United States is in a metro area. That means we are completely reliant on outputs coming into a city. So my goal was not necessarily to make new farmers out of everybody, but to say, you might want to think for a second. Think about respect for farmers. Learn about the things that you rely so heavily on. Every bite that goes in your body, also, what's the nutrition? Is it laced with chemicals? It's such a big piece of a unifying piece. And I thought running a campus farm and small urban fringe farms, and at Evergreen State College before this, is people having the opportunity to at least get their hands in the dirt and get involved and just start to think about their lives and the food system in their life. You guys are at this wonderful age in a college system where you're starting to really solidify a lot of ideologies and thoughts, and still have this moment where you can take action and have not everybody, but has the freedom to take action and make real change. And I think universities across and colleges, a lot of people are away from home, and they're in this where collectively you can come together and affect change, or individually. Some people have other jobs and they can't do that, but at universities is a hotbed for taking action. So I thought, okay, one really cool thing is to remove the curtain that separates the consumer or the eater from the food that they rely on. There's also a lot of stories. I'm particularly interested in seeds that are biodiversity and the disappearance of certain varieties, and making sure those varieties are still around for diversity of the food system. So there's a lot. It's a lot.
When you said you got here 2010?
2012. I officially
2012,
got here in September of 2012 and started UW, but I had a visit in 2010 where I went, wait a minute, this is real. I had an aha moment about this city.
This area.
Yeah.
And then so what was the transition from you being a student until you running the farm?
Well, moving to a new place with no network, I wasn't so sure I was really going to be at the University of Washington. I thought I was going to work in the nonprofit sector. Like Viva Farms is a nonprofit that provides land access for new and beginning farmers or immigrants in farming that want to start here fresh. And so I originally worked at smaller locations with bigger farms here, but took the opportunity at UW because of the potential for impact. This is a very large university with a lot of students. And honestly, at my age, I looked at the opportunities I could have to keep learning. So there's a lot of classes that for people my age, I could keep learning professionally. And also as a farmer, having health benefits, a regular office. This is a year-round job, and a lot of farming isn't year-round. It's very seasonal. So this one is really different because you have that academic piece. It's cool. So when I first walked into the door, it was April. Half of the CSA was already sold, at least, which is a weekly subscription of distribution of produce to the community, to households. And coming from a commercial farming background and selling to restaurants and farmers markets and everything, and at Evergreen State College, they had a really good CSA. I had that knowledge, but here it's much more complicated. You're dealing with a much larger bureaucracy.
In what way?
The biggest challenge here is in order to have a new activity, you have to go through layers of approval. Most farmers are known as being independent and somewhat isolated, and you run your own business. Here, you have to look for permission and approval for almost everything. Like right now, we can't sell like tomato sauce. There are beehives, but I don't have permission to sell honey. If I want to hire a student, I need to go through 3 different tiers of approval and potentially 3 weeks of paperwork and approvals.
And
so there's a lot
who's
more.
in like the decision maker of
Yeah.
that?
I report directly to, and this is changing, a director. And right now, that's the director of the UW Botanic Gardens, which is inside the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences, which is inside of the College of the Environment.
Okay.
And that means that the dean, some things that I do have to go up to one director, and once they pass through that director, it goes to the next director, and then it has to be approved by the dean.
Wow.
So that can take some time.
Yeah.
If I was a farmer, commercial farmer, you'd show up at my farm.
Yeah.
We'd work together. I'd watch you work. I'd see if you had all the skills you said you did on your resume. See if you got along. I'd check your references, and I could hire you in 24 hours or that day, and you could start tomorrow.
Yeah.
Here, it's a whole first you have to get the description of the position approved. That goes through review, through that whole tier of review, and then they'll change it. Then it comes back, I'll do edits, then it goes back, and then you have to assign a pay rate that has to fall within an approved category. Then you advertise, then you have to have a panel that looks at all the applications.
So you can't look at all the applications
I
yourself?
can, but the names and addresses should be redacted or removed. It depends on the position I'm hiring for.
Okay.
If it's a non-student position, all the resumes that come in, I can't see the names or addresses or phone numbers to keep it. Like, I just have to look at the content.
Yeah.
So someone else removes all of the personal information.
Yeah.
Then you create a panel. The panel then reviews and rates based on a metric.
Interesting.
Then you do the interviews. Then after the interviews, you then narrow it down, and then you do an offer. But there has to be a background check first. After the background check, then they go through onboarding. And onboarding means getting all their information into the Workday HR system.
Wow.
And that can take 2 weeks to a month.
Yeah.
So it's about, in a good day, on a good year, it's about 4 months. 6 months. 6 months from advertising, getting the position description to the person actually maybe walking on site.
Wow.
And in farming, it's highly seasonal.
Okay.
So you have to basically start the ball rolling in November for the person to start in April.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's the HR piece. People work really hard at this university. So something I've discovered is the bigger the boat, the more people there are, and if you're going to be, and the more opinions you're going to have, and the more policies you're going to have. So on smaller farms, smaller universities that I've worked on, there's only one person in HR. There's not those 3 tiers. So it makes things take longer. The pay, although, is most farms pay a lot less than we pay here, which makes sense because most of the people who work at the university farm and students, they have to pay a very high rent.
Yeah.
So the farm has to come up with at least 30 to 40% more per hour than a regular farm. And commercial farming, you're paid by how much you pick. You're not paid hourly. A lot of people are paid by how many apples they pick, and they're weighed. They're not paid by the hour in general. Or it's extremely low per hour. And then if you pick, and then they weigh your apples as you pick them, and you're paid by how much you pick. So farming is rarely hourly.
So it's different here in the university.
Depends, but the university is hourly, and then depending on a student versus a non-student, work study versus not work study, scholarship or not scholarship, there's probably, I have like 5 different funding mechanisms for different positions.
Yeah.
So I'm moving, it's like a chessboard. How I get people on the team.
Yeah.
Much like a chessboard, like moving pieces all the time, and the budget is the chessboard.
How many workers does the UW farm have?
There's 2 permanent non-student staff, myself and the production manager, right now.
Okay.
AmeriCorps was terminated nationwide.
I just heard about that.
The the farm used to be 1 staff, and then very quickly it became 2, supported by a donor in the community. And then for 2 years we were 3, one of them being an AmeriCorps. And so AmeriCorps comes and goes every year. They're here with us 11 months, and that's it. Maybe 15 months. So you're constantly bringing on a new AmeriCorps, which is a lot like some other farms. So there's 2 staff, and if you're just running a farm for 2.5 acres that we have, that's pretty small.
Yeah.
2 people with maybe a couple seasonal is really, in fact, if you're in your mid-20s and early 30s, you could probably run a 2-acre farm with just 2 people or 1. Depends on what you're growing. 5 acres of squash, you kind of plant it and walk away. But we grow over 135 varieties. It's highly diverse. It's hard to keep track of all those little things, catering to lots of different curriculum and ideas and thoughts and diets.
Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought, but basically
2 workers.
Yeah, so
and then,
2, and then
like a lot of like work study.
And things have changed. Right now, we only hire hourly staff who are work study eligible.
Okay.
That's it. Because my budget has gotten, we're trying to free up money for the 2 staff.
Okay.
So.
And then my next question is, how?
And then we did get a donor for a scholarship. We have 1 scholarship, the Danny Alenga, named after their daughter, is a stipended position.
Okay.
So that means you have work study, 1 scholarship position, and 2 staff. So that means the team is pretty much with the AmeriCorps, 4 for sure, 4 to 6 people. You know, and then we have all this unpaid internships, which we do mostly during the summer. And those are, there's a lot of learning in that.
Yeah.
but it's a net positive. So it isn't like just hiring a staff or getting them trained and having them work. An internship is very different because legally and also morally, ethically, that intern is there to learn, and you can't hold them to the same bar that you would someone you pay hourly. They're volunteering. So we have a lot of unpaid volunteer interns. And our capacity is only so big because there's a lot of onboarding and training and showing people the way and making sure that they're learning and they come away with something new, something that they wanted, a focus that a lot of people are, I just want to be on the farm, but you know, you don't want to keep harvesting kale every single week without some kind of learning component or something that excites a student.
Yeah.
So that academic piece is also part, it's tied into the labor and it's tied into our production because they're learning about the varieties, but we're also, everything people are doing affects our bottom line. We are a working farm because we rely so heavily on sales of produce because the student farm is not part of a department or program. Okay. So a lot of you guys all paying for tuition in class goes into that department, the fee, and then that's distributed according to the dean of that department. And it might pay for faculty, it might pay for tables, it might pay for field trips, it might pay for whatever, but that's a lot of money coming into the department. The UW farm doesn't have that academic-based budgeting.
Funding from
so we have to be self-sustaining,
and you guys sell things. So what's like the percentage you would say, like money you get funded and then the money you get from?
Well, one position, one of the two full permanent positions is funded out of sales of produce.
Sales of produce, okay.
Then the other position is, it's not a sure thing, but it's a series of written agreements with different departments. And most of them are people who use the farm pretty heavily.
Okay.
And so they realize that the field trips, the labs, the interns, all that is a lot of work. And so it's different departments giving quantities of money, which funds my position.
Okay.
So you have multiple departments. And then you have this one that is not a department called UW Housing and Food Services. And they pay a fee for management of this site. So we are in effect like grounds. And so in exchange for that fee, which is the last piece of my salary, is to make sure that this site looks really beautiful. And we are in a LEED Platinum certified, which is the highest level of an environmental decal or certification, as having a residential complex with an urban farm in it. And so we're like grounds and maintenance. They want us to make sure that it's taken care of, the walkways are clear, everything looks good. So we're really not, they don't really care about our production so much as we are hired to make sure that it's kept up. And they want it to be the produce and everything. So we have a really good relationship with Housing and Food Services and UW Dining, who purchases from us. And then really the bread and butter of our program for funding is the Community Supported Agriculture Program. And that's a subscription-based program where people pay for 8 weeks or 16 weeks, and they give us money in the beginning of the season, and then they have a share of the produce throughout the rest of the season. And that's common with a lot of commercial farms. So there's aspects of overall the percent we earn from produce is probably about 30%, 33%. The percent we earn from department agreements is 33%. And then the other 33% is donors. So we're kind of, the department's academia are only funding about 33%.
Okay.
And then donors are now this 33%, and then our sales of produce. And together which in a way is good because we're not relying on this one. Right now, research we're a tier 1 research facility, and one of the big challenges the farm has is there's no ag program. The farm was started by students who really were like, they were in the medicinal garden and said, how about we could eat some plants too and learn about growing plants that we can consume for healthy eating, and a lot of reasons for learning about plants, about pollinators, about the dirt, about the soil, the agro-ecosystem. And not just the natural ecosystem, but an agroecology. So, and then I'd say probably 80% of our labor, spring and fall, is students.
Yeah.
But it's only spring and fall. And then the farm is at peak production August and September. So unlike a commercial farm or a nonprofit sector that have farms, they're doing a lot of their hiring for the season. Ours is very manic. We have like too many. No one in the month of June. Like, where do you? I mean, you guys have just completed finals. You're done.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm out of here. Where are you going to be this summer?
I'm gonna go to Ecuador.
Right, you're going to Ecuador.
Yes.
Right when we need you the most. Anyway, so June we're pretty strapped. It's also officially no work study students can work during the month of June either.
Okay.
And so that's a really important month in the growing calendar at this latitude. And then there's a couple classes. There's the summer urban farm class and the summer practicum class. And those, if you've done service learning, you've taken urban farm, there's a little bit of curriculum on the farm in the summer. It's a little bit. And then that ends mid-August, and it's 8 weeks before we see students again, right at peak.
Wow.
So that's when we become very much a community-facing organization and really rely on the community for what we do. Non-UW or UW people. We really start to look like a real blend of people during the summer months, and that's critical for us. What was the other thing? There was another thing I was going to talk about. I totally forgot. Yeah. Oh, the growing calendar. So what's interesting about us is the university that purchases from us. When does school start? In the September.
Late September.
Right. And we're at peak at the end of August, beginning of September, right? Pumping out the produce. And so they want to start purchasing in like the first week of October. They want to purchase in November. They want to purchase in December, January, February, March, April, May, and then nothing in June. July, August, September. So there's a mishit between campus farms when it's really not only the most productive, but also the most learning. The most of the classroom is during the summer, where everything is going and you can see all these pollinators, you can see the tomatoes and have the greatest diversity of plants.
Wow.
And the soil also, the biological activity in the soil is going to be just cranking away. It's not going to be like that in January. So one of the hurdles or the challenges as a campus farm is to sort of line those up a little bit better. So a new project is this resiliency tunnel project. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's probably not part of this interview, is to create a completely solar powered, special, novel design high tunnel where we can grow a lot of greens in the winter because it's light that affects our production. And if we have solar powered lights, we can get more growth in the winter and the off season.
So the about that
resiliency tunnel it's going to take a bit of time because, and that's the other thing, is if you want to build anything, you go through at least about a year's worth of approvals. That's true, I think, with a lot of people that just want to build a house or whatever. But as a farmer, commercial farmer, when I wanted to put up a high tunnel, I just put it up. I didn't ask anybody. It's just it's a portable greenhouse. You just put the poles in the ground and go. Here, it's been 5 years so far that I've been working on it. So it's a lot of bureaucracy, but the beauty of it is students get to be involved. All right, what else you got?
So
your major,
My major
is ethnocentric.
Yes.
So the culture, so we're in Seattle. We are very close to the ocean. We are also hemmed in by the mountains and the sea. So there isn't a lot of sprawl. You have a topography that kind of tells us where we need to live. One of the super cool things about the farm is it's walking distance to so many people. So if you think about, also 100% of our eaters are like less than 10 miles. So that's going to create a really, a lot of community connections very close by to an urban farm versus a rural farm. And having that green space is going to affect the neighbors to this space and the people that live here who can view the farm. The city of Seattle has a very robust community garden program. And so I think what's great is with the community garden program and urban farms, we fit into this large sort of template of ways people can get involved in the food system and get their hands in the dirt. Yeah. And ours is on a parking garage. The 50% of this is on top of a parking garage, on a landfill, and on a rooftop. So, yeah. What else? Ethno. Plants? Are you interested in the environmental side of it and plants?
Yeah. I'm interested in everything.
Yeah. Have you noticed some interesting plants since you've been volunteering that you've never thought of?
I don't know a lot of plants, so...
What did you plant today?
What did we plant? Celery?
What color was it?
Green.
What the color were the stems?
I didn't look at the stems.
They were pink. So we're planting this interesting type of celery that has pink stems, which is going to be, the nutrition is going to be different. So one of the cool things about being highly diverse as a farm is exposing people to a lot of crops that the conglomerate of supermarkets, Kroger, QFC, Safeway, that are multi-state corporations, they're going to select the same tomato for all their stores. Less inventory is a nightmare. So what color are tomatoes?
Red.
Or are they? I know tomatoes that are black, purple, yellow, orange, striped, spotted. Each one has a different flavor and shelf life and a different nutritional content, and they all have stories. There's a Cherokee purple tomato. There's also Dancing with Smurfs. And there's heirloom varieties. And only small-scale farmers tend to grow heirlooms. And there's a reason that they're heirloom. They existed pre-World War II. And they're still being grown today without any genetic modification, which is a diversity that we can rely on to carry us into the future. If they've been around for 100 years through different temperature changes and events, like I mentioned, they might be a resource for us in the future for diversity. So having a lot of diversity, we also grow purple sugar snap peas, which I don't think people normally think of, yellow beans, purple beans, a lot of indigenous crops, to make sure that we acknowledge the space that we're occupying and that we're still having those conversations about history. And so a lot of the varieties we have are just not commercially available. They might have a very short shelf life, but their flavor is phenomenal. So when you start to change crops and select for extended shelf life and ability to transport long distances, and it never gets dented, something has to go. And often that might be smell or taste or flavor. So it's hard to get everything. So we have a large diversity, and we look for real signature crops and then input from the people who purchase. So the Utah Food Pantry, we ask them what they really want. We ask CSA shareholders what they want. What do dining chefs want? So that means they have a space where they can have decision-making power in what they're purchasing, which we just go to the supermarket, we look at the shelf and we go, that looks good. I don't know. It's on sale. Yummy. But you don't I don't know if you've noticed, but look at some shelves and there's less brands.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of one brand. And when you put less diversity, you're relying on very few types of crops.
How does that happen?
The big companies put toilet paper out for bid and say, all right, tell me how much your toilet paper is. And if it's the cheapest, they just buy it. And then they eliminate everybody else. And they just do a lot of that one thing. And it's supply and demand. So it's a competitive marketplace, and they look for the competition in suppliers. There's a great movie about Walmart and how they select their suppliers. They put them all in the same room. And they say, okay, what is the price that you all are pitching for me on tube socks? And one guy goes, oh, $1.25. And then everybody's standing there going, frick, I have to go lower. So I'm going to go a buck. The other guy's like, well, I'm going to have to go lower than that. So I'm going to 85 cents. And then it's competitive.
Wow.
And it's really, I saw it in a documentary. I was like, wow.
What's the movie called?
I'd forgotten, but I'll find it. And so what you end up doing is you're looking at the cheapest price. It has nothing to do with where the company's located, who are they employing, shipping distance. And it does, the bottom line is the bottom line. They have to make money. Anyway, so that you start to decrease the amount of suppliers looking for the highest profit and who's going to bend. So a lot of our stuff's overseas now, but anyway. So.
Okay, I think
we've gone on.